Hi, I'm Megan Story, and I am presenting Module 1, Communicating Who You Are for EDL 854, Building Finance. So about me, I am a mother to 3 children under the age of 4. So this is my daughter, Sailor, this is Milo, and Jackson. I live south of the Kansas City Metro, where I am a teacher. I have previously taught 2nd grade and 4th grade. I've been a varsity volleyball coach and a varsity cheer coach. Currently, I am teaching at Spring Hill Middle School in Spring Hill, Kansas, where I am a science teacher. During COVID, I taught 6th grade in person, I taught 8th grade in person, and then I also taught our 6th grade optional remote learning for both middle schools in the Spring Hill School District, as well as I was a basketball coach. I've been teaching for 8 years. This will be my 8th year. I've been in 4 school districts in 3 different states. We tend to move a lot due to coaching. My educational background is in elementary education. I have a bachelor's in K-8 from Northwestern Oklahoma State University. I have a master's in instructional technology from Fort Hays, and then I am finishing up my building leadership master's also. So after looking at the resources that were provided, some significant information that I found from Chin happened to be that 48% of schools' budgets come from state resources, usually taxes and fees. 44% is your local contribution of property tax, but only actually 8% comes from your federal sources of income, and a lot of times those are things that are school districts that are usually underfunded with like Title I, ELA, ELL, that sort of thing. Schools can use federal funding if that state government does not choose to participate. And then a lot of times there's inequality in public school funding state to state. So even me traveling from Kansas to Oklahoma to Missouri, there's a big deficit like when you go from Oklahoma to Kansas in those findings of the different school funding. But it's also kind of on a flip side to that is that like Oklahoma offers fully paid kindergarten, pre-K, and a 3-year-old program, and they brought that back. But in Kansas, we actually pay tuition up until kindergarten, unless you're in a school district that is able to provide those services due to usually some underfunding. Then when we did Petrick in the 20th century is when we saw the began and rise of principals. And so principals, their major role is to lead school reforms, defining those educational objectives and goals of what we are trying to achieve. Your school budget is going to equals your projected revenue and expenditure. And then budget is vital and establishes a system of control. So next, when I'm talking about the next information that was provided, I noticed that one of the big things is it was talking about how most educators lack financial literacy. And I find that to be true because a lot of administrators, when we come from an education background, truly know education, we don't necessarily know the financial portion of it. And so with that, to understand our financial limitations, we need to be regularly approving and revising budgets. We want to establish procedures for handling income so that all rules and regulations are followed. And then you want to report the use of funds to relevant parties. So a lot of times, like you'll see on our school board that we'll have budget reports and that sort of thing so that everybody's aware. Budget decisions can come from the top down. So a lot of times your legislators and your district level bureaucrats are the ones who are making those decisions instead of principals. Principals usually just know how to allocate the funds. So you're limiting schools' control, and this is what causes the inefficiencies in education. With your central office allocating money, it's usually a one-size-fits-all method. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily need to be that way, especially so for example, in my district, we are having a massive growth in my district. It's one of the biggest growing districts right now. And so within a short time span, we will have 3 middle schools. But the middle school that I'm currently at didn't receive any of the new fun things compared to the new middle school that got brought on. Nothing was equal, and a lot of stakeholders were very upset in that process that we still have to use 10-year-old jerseys, but they got brand new everything. And so with that, there's some trade-offs for what schools actually need. So we ended up getting like more staff instead of like actual products. So the goal is to meet student needs, which us getting staff was more important than new jerseys, new textbooks, that sort of thing. So in the assignment, we were asked to talk about our principal's experience, and so I've kind of had a weird experience since I came to Spring Hill, just because we've been trying to bring on another middle school online. And so at one point in time, we had 4 or 5 principals in my building. They were all working from one building. And now we're down to, last year we had 3 because we had 2 green brand new principals. And now we're down to the 2, which COVID didn't help anybody. But ultimately, it showed the lack of an experience. So my 2 principals are brand new to being a principal. They're green. And then you brought in 13 first-year teachers. And that, in all honesty, was a nightmare. And so it was really hard. And so somebody like me who's only taught 8 years and doesn't feel like a veteran became a veteran. And so here's the background. My principal, he's an awesome guy. Very much a go-getter, but he's young and inexperienced, and he has yet to have a normal year because he's worked with other principals, and then COVID hit, that sort of thing. He's a very closed-door, secreted type of principal. My principal prior to him was very, loose-lipped. He's very closed-door and takes everything to the high up instead of handling it within a lot of times. Basically, the only financial aspect, even in building leadership, I've been on for 3 years with him, even with that, he's only ever talked about what funds got allocated to the classrooms by their departments. So for example, I'm a science teacher and science department gets allotted, each classroom gets allotted this amount each year. But he tends to say, well, I tried to go with this idea, but I get rejected a lot from the higher up, which is probably true. And then he tends to pass the buck a lot of times to his financial secretary who handles everything. Future budget concerns that I have is not being able to provide allocated funds for student needs. Ultimately, student needs are the biggest part of why we are educators. And so I'm concerned that we won't be able to meet all the student needs with the budget, which is always going to be a problem. Lack of money and lack of staff making your environment toxic. And so when you lack the staff and the qualities that are needed to provide such a resource for your school, it tends to make the environment toxic where everybody feels overworked, overstressed. And then we basically, when managing budgets behind the scenes, I'm nervous about trying to manage those while trying to deal with the daily grind, the upfront grind of disciplined parents, handling teacher issues, that sort of thing. Here are my references. Thank you.